It all starts with this. This is the ultimate power.
Hello everybody, it's me, your good friend Sparky, and welcome back to Sonic Heroes. Today, Team Sonic is going to be taking on the Frog Forest in stage number 9. A forest that, as you can probably guess, is going to be filled with frogs. And giant fruits, and giant vines, and plant roads to run down. Honestly, thinking about it critically, and thinking about all the different stages and such in Sonic Heroes, I want to say this pair of stages is actually probably my favorite stages in the game. It has a pretty unique mechanic here where you've got these, like, entire giant environment, and these giant frogs hopping around the stage that all look like Froggy. And I honestly wonder if they are just a Froggy model from Sonic Adventure DX or something, just blown up to ginormous proportions and scattered about this level. In fact, I almost imagine that Big the Cat himself probably had something to do with designing this stage. Like, it was in his contract that if he was going to make a reappearance in this game, that he wanted an entire level, or like pair of levels, based around Froggy or something like that. And you know what? It works. I always find, like, giant environments very intriguing in games. It's like the Giant Land in Super Mario Bros. 3, which Super Mario Bros. 3 is not really a game that I'm crazy about like a lot of people are, but that giant world, man, that stuff is cool. That stuff is really freaking cool. And not to mention, it's also this whole, like, jungle setting where I have stated my admiration of, like, cave-based levels in the past in several videos. And I love the concept of underground exploration and stuff, too. But I also really like areas that are, like, nature-based. Like, jungle-y areas and forest areas. I think partly because I grew up in a very heavily wooded area. Whenever I had the time growing up, I would spend a lot of time, falling into the abyss. No, wait, that's Knuckles. Never mind. No sense in cutting ahead, considering we just hit a checkpoint. But, anyway. Growing up, I spent a lot of time just kind of exploring the woods around my house. And that seems exceedingly dangerous in hindsight. You never know what sort of wild animals you're going to wander into in the woods. Because, yes, there are coyotes in the area. There were, bears in the area, though you don't see them very often. They are there. And, me and my older sister, two relatively young children, wandering around unattended in the dangerous forest. You know, probably not the smartest idea, but it kind of instilled a love in me of just, like, wooded areas in games and, like, jungle areas in games. Like, I think a lot about the, jungle area in the original Paper Mario, too. Not just because it's surrounded by Yoshis, and Yoshis are amazing, but because you get that opportunity to go out into the jungle and explore, and then you go into a volcanic cave, and altogether, that's just, like, two of my level preferences mixed together, and it's, like, super freaking awesome, and I love that area. But, probably shouldn't be talking about Paper Mario when we're, trying to talk about good old Sonic the Hedgehog here. We'll definitely get to Paper Mario on the channel at some point, but back to the subject at hand. This level, it's just aesthetically, it's really pleasing with the, like, you're wandering around this giant jungle, and there's giant mushrooms and fruits and stuff, and the giant frogs. It just all works really well for me as a whole. And not to mention the fact that it's got the entire gimmick of these frogs being able to summon rain. And when the frogs summon rain, it causes platforms to grow and appear. The rain causes the levels to change and the whole level layout to alter. And it's just... it's really freaking cool. And not to mention, we just had like another drop of a reference to the past Sonic games, Knuckles acknowledging the fact that he also has giant mushrooms and stuff on his island. It's just a nice little attention to detail there. But this whole mechanic with the frogs summoning the rain and causing the levels to change is really cool. And not to mention, you have these, you'll end up getting these segments where you're like grinding along vines like it's freaking Disney's Tarzan or something like that. And you cause the rain to happen, and as you're grinding along the vines, they're growing in front of you when the rain's going off. And it's like, it's the sort of thing that kind of blew my mind when I was younger. I guess nowadays it might not be anything technically that impressive, but I don't remember many games having that sort of like level altering around you sort of things that I had played up to that point. I mean, there are always like creative level choices and things like that, of course, but overall, this stage is just so nice. These stages are so cool. And I really, really think they might be my favorites in the game. The Sonic Heroes overall, it has a lot of really great stages and a lot of really fun levels. But really thinking about it, really thinking about all the different stages we've played so far and thinking about the different stages that are upcoming, I mean, just look at this, where the vine is growing in front of you. I, like, had no idea how they even made that work on a GameCube game back then, or how they really made it work on a GameCube game nowadays. But they had their ways, and hey, we've made it through the first stage already. A nice, clean finish, only accidentally fell off the stage once. Not bad at all. But that's all for Team Sonic for the moment. We're going to be moving on to the next stage after our score countdown is done.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. I agree, Knuckles. But now we gotta head right into stage number 10 with Team Dark. We're going to the Lost Jungle. Well, it's not so lost considering all of our teams have to go through this same stage when you're playing the game regularly. But I guess calling it the Found Jungle just doesn't have the same ring to it. But this stage is pretty interesting too. Not only does it continue to sort of increase the difficulty factor of the game, we now have these giant enemies with lots and lots of health to eat through. But it also kind of flips the mechanics of the last level immediately on their head to create sort of an opposite feel to what you were just playing. It's honestly all really well designed. We'll get to see it in a bit here after we're done dealing with the robots in our pads and the giant robot fights. Naturally, because these levels are pretty gimmick heavy with the frogs and the rain and things like that, and they add in the very giant robots on top of that, who do start to get much harder. It does kind of lead to more kind of cheap deaths and things like that in spots, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of part of it. But now in this stage, in addition to the regular frogs, we also have these black frogs scattered about, whose job is doing the complete opposite of the regular frogs. Their rain, when it starts to fall, causes parts of the level to vanish. So if you can avoid getting seen by them, you can actually gain access to different items and things like that you normally wouldn't be able to. But at the same time, even though you would see that as kind of a negative thing, it honestly also does end up coming in handy. Like right here, for example. The fruit starts to fall off of the vines when the rain is triggered, but if there are enemies in the ways of those fruits, then the fruit also will destroy the enemies. So you can kind of strategically use the frogs to your advantage to sort of clear the way. Not that dealing with basic enemies is really all that hard on its own, but it's just kind of interesting how they came up with this mechanic of the frogs creating paths forward and creating new areas to jump around and explore, and then they immediately flip it around and create the opposite mechanic that you have to deal with in the last level. So it teaches you one thing, and then you have to take what you learned and apply the opposite thinking to it, and I don't know, it just sort of adds to the enjoyment I have in these levels, where it's an aesthetic I really like, and a clever mechanic, and also a clever opposite mechanic at the same time. You can tell in stages like this where a lot of thought really went into the stage design and things like that. And that's true of basically any of the levels here. But it's, I don't know, it's just really nice. Here we've got the fruit bouncing down and destroying the enemies, like I mentioned. It's just really cool, all of the kind of creative thought process that you can see went into designing these stages and designing this game. Sonic Heroes, even though it's got its issues with the stage length and things like that, it's definitely an incredibly creative and unique game in the Sonic franchise, and I really wish that they would have continued doing more with this idea. And then we have parts like this where we've got the silver enemies, which have tougher defenses that really only the power characters can take care of in a lot of moments. But those guys, they also have spikes that come out of them that increase their defenses even further, and you can't really attack them directly when they've got the spikes out. So you can stun them with Thundershoot, but if you stun them with Thundershoot at the wrong time, you can't really do anything about it because the spikes are out, and they won't go away until they stop being stunned. And also, naturally, when you've got the tougher enemies around like that, you can effectively use your Team Blast to take care of them pretty quickly. At this point, it really starts to end up being a situation where you've got to save your Team Blast for the right moments to be able to effectively get through a level. Especially if you're going for A ranks, which are very much determined by time and how long you're in the stage for a lot of the points you end up getting. Not entirely. There are some quirks to getting A ranks and things like that that we can talk about, but I think I might want to save that for another time if I decide to kind of do any more sort of in-depth videos past the primary playthrough here. But your Team Blast, of course, always comes in handy, but having it in reserve and sort of saving it for the right opportunity definitely becomes pretty important as you proceed forward through the game. So like a situation like this, where we've got a very tough enemy around to deal with, and they might be blocking the way, or you have to defeat them in order to make progress forward. I'm not even really sure what just happened there. It kind of just seemed like we randomly took damage, but whatever. Just saving the Team Blast for the right opportunity and trying not to waste it is definitely important when you're planning around the most effective way to get through a level. It has a level of strategy that you wouldn't necessarily think a Sonic stage would have, especially when it's a move that's just like a kill button. Like right here, we use our Team Blast, we use Chaos Inferno, We stop time, and we also immediately defeat that enemy in order to make quicker progress forward. It's pretty nice, honestly. The Team Blast, at first, it does come off as just being a standard screen wipe move, but when you really start to think about it, it definitely ends up having a strategic function like that. And then we've also got parts like this where we kind of have to work with the right frog at the right time. The black frog causes platforms to disappear, but we need to find the green frog around the corner in order to make the platforms reappear. And it's just a matter of doing the right thing at the right time and causing the vines to show up when you need it, or causing the platforms to grow when you need it, or causing the platforms to not grow when you need it. But you also have moments like this where the grinding mechanics don't really seem to want to work. And you just kind of fall into the swamp below. But that's fine. It's quite alright. No harm done. We were pretty close to where we need to be regardless, and we can continue to have our little vine sliding adventure and get to relatively close to the end of the stage, which, yeah, has a giant alligator or something in it, or a crocodile. I don't really know. Unfortunately, this is another part where it's pretty easy to mess up on while you're escaping from the giant beast behind you, because the camera's facing away from you, and you've got to swing from the vines properly. I mean, we had already lost a life and kind of messed up our score regardless, but that's a segment that's pretty easy to mess up on right at the end of the stage, and it can end up causing your rank to suffer because of it. Oh well. It is what it is, and we end up clearing the stage nice and quickly without much of a good end rank. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be very happy.
What's wrong with me?
Not very happy in the slightest. But now it's time to move on to our next boss.
Look, it's that hedgehog.
Wonder what the big rush is all about. Bet you those guys will end up getting in my way and making trouble.
Hey, isn't that...
Sonic! Talk about being stubborn and full of surprises.
Long time no see, boys. Too bad you had to come all this way for nothing. We'll take it from here.
What'd you say?
Sensors locked on Eggman. Non-compliant intruders will be destroyed.
Didn't you know? We have a date with Eggman, too.
Is that so? Well then, it'll be a date to die for.
Hey, that's my line.
Yep, it's time for another team battle with an epic clash between Team Sonic and Team Dark. This is gonna be a fight to remember.
What was with that hedgehog that looked like my twin?
Annihilate.
That's the best way to greet those you haven't seen in a while.
That being said, the reunion of Sonic and Shadow here, I feel like is a little botched narratively. Naturally, this game isn't going to be very story-heavy with a lot of long cutscenes or anything like that. But at the same time, Team Sonic as a whole, they don't seem all that surprised to see Shadow, who they were pretty sure was dead up to this point. He literally fell from space and wasn't seen again, and now he's just here. You would think they would have more of a reaction to that. Sonic comments on it, but I don't know. I feel like it could have been done better. Not that Shadow would even recognize them, technically, even though he seemed to notice them and remember them immediately right from the start of the battle there. I feel like it's just... This segment here, it has some weird quirks with the dialogue and the translation from the Japanese script, I guess. And it doesn't really end up working out, and I feel like it could have been done much better. But all the same, a battle between Team Sonic and Team Dark, or any Sonic versus Shadow fight, is always going to be a lot of fun to do narratively. And I enjoy it a lot. The fight itself, it is definitely a good mark more difficult than the last team battle, because, for one thing, the enemy team can use Team Blast now. which, if you get hit by them, and you often do, it sends you flying. That being said, Chaos Inferno kind of backfires on Team Dark here, and they don't really know what to do now. But, you know. You can, of course, power up your own Team Blast gauge and use yours against them, too, which would, in fact, have a bonus effect of recovering Sonic since he's been knocked off. But you do gotta pay attention because the opposite is true. If the enemy team uses their Team Blast, it does recover their teammates. Though, that fight overall ended up being kind of ending on a disappointing note, considering Team Dark sort of just slipped off the edge there. But it's all fine, because we also need to see this fight from the opposite perspective while playing as Team Dark and fighting Team Sonic. Because, of course, much like in Sonic Adventure 2, there's two sides to every one of these team battles. And Shadow, Sonic doesn't look like your twin. I know that was a thing in Sonic Adventure 2 where people were mistaking Sonic for Shadow and Shadow for Sonic, and it was a big thing, and Sonic almost got arrested because of it. In fact, he did get arrested because of it, and he was blamed for a lot of things he didn't do. And it's the sort of thing where if you're describing Sonic or Shadow in passing and you don't mention their, like, fur color, yeah, you could probably mistake one for the other, but Sonic and Shadow really don't look anything alike. It's the sort of thing that's been pointed out over and over again, I'm sure. But, yeah. It doesn't make any sense, and it never really made any sense. This fight in general, it did end up bringing up the optimal way to do these team battles, though. And that is using your tornado maneuver. You switch to speed, you use the tornado, and you knock the enemies around. Because trying to do what the game wants you to with the rock, paper, scissors mechanic, it really doesn't end up working, much like in the last fight. I suppose it has its advantages, but overall, most of what you end up doing to the opposite team really just kind of inconveniences them, and you really need a maneuver that really sends them flying, and the tornado maneuver is the, like, most perfect thing for that. You can try to swap around and do everything you can to play the fight the way the team wants you to play it. I mean, you know, the way the game wants you to play it. But spamming tornadoes definitely seems to be the optimal strategy. Though that is going to call it for right now. Thank you very much for watching.
Sorry, but no time for greeting.
This is your good friend Sparky signing off, and I will catch you later.